Ready for some more?
Yes!
Alright. Hardcore crowds. Storytelling lovers. Yes?
Yes.
This is not part of the show. This is, I'm sorry. Can you hold this? No, it's okay. Yeah, it's fine. No, I do it standing. Is it possible to ask for a bit more light on the audience?
Sure.
So that I can see your faces as well?
Oh, for them?
Yes, for them.
Maybe you can bunu düşürebilirsin böyle.
It's okay.
Is it okay for you?
Yes.
Perfect. Then here we go. Esra, shall we?
Знаешь, я еще писал, что
So I've heard this song in 7 different languages. Greek included. In all of the 7 languages it says the same thing. Gledeme, kitame, look at me. Look at me, my love. It says, look at me, my love, because today I'm here. Tomorrow I'm not. I'm going to Istanbul, it says. What would you like me to bring you when I'm back?
Κοίτα πρώτη μου αγάπη, σήμερα είμαι εδώ. Κοίτα πρώτη μου αγάπη, σήμερα είμαι εδώ. Σήμερα είμαι εδώ αγάπη, σήμερα είμαι εδώ. Σήμερα είμαι, αύριο δεν είμαι, θα πάω στην πό. Σήμερα είμαι, αύριο δεν είμαι, θα πάω στην πό. Θα πάω στην πόλη αγάπη, θα πάω στην πό. Θα πάω στην πόλη, πρώτη μου αγάπη, τι να σου φέρω. Θα πάω στην πόλη, πρώτη μου αγάπη, τι να σου φέρω.
And she says, bring me poison, my love. She says, bring me poison so that I drink it and then finally my enemies will be happy. My enemies, your friends.
Φέρε μου να πιω αγάπη, φέρε μου να πιω. Φέρε πικρό φαρμάκι να φαρμακωθώ. Φέρε πικρό φαρμάκι να φαρμακωθώ. Να φαρμακωθώ. χαίρονται δικοί σου φίλοι, δικοί μου εχθροί. Να χαίρονται δικοί σου φίλοι, δικοί μου εχθροί.
Sorry for turning the mic. Good evening. Okay, so my father used to take us on a trip every summer, on a trip to the north of Greece, to the north of Greece, to the village where he grew up in, the village of my grandfather. That's a village in the north of Greece between the mountains. And that village used to be mixed. So Greek-speaking people and Turkish-speaking people lived together, and my father grew up learning both languages, so he was bilingual. And even though he left quite early from this village when he was 14, and even though on the way he forgot most of his Turkish, still, he went back to this village every year, every summer. And even when he had us, he would take the family and he would go to every summer the same trip. It was a chance for the family to reconnect. It was a chance for me to spend some time, the family spend some time in nature outside. We grew up in Athens, so it's like a very city, urban environment. So also my mother is a painter, so she would spend some time in nature, painting landscapes. My father was a businessman. But that trip brought out his more creative side, let's say. So he would take his tape recorder and he would visit all the relatives and he would collect their stories. He was obsessed with it. He had a mission. He had a mission to collect all of the stories especially he would visit one by one the elder family members, the ones who were closer to depart, and he would collect their stories. It was like he was every summer the same thing. Now, me, I wouldn't even leave the kitchen. I would be attached to my grandmother's hip, was like there, my grandmother, and she would feed me all day. She would force me. She always thought I was too skinny. No matter how big too skinny, you need to eat more. You need to eat. And then she would cook all these Greek and Turkish delicacies like turlou, imam, dolmas, all of those things. Yeah, and my favorite one is kayana. I don't know how you call it here. Okay, if one person says it, then maybe... Kaygana. Kaygana, okay, so you know what it is, yeah? I don't need to describe it.
No.
And, okay, so it was my favorite for a few reasons. One is that I could ask for this dish at any point in the day or the night. Like, whenever I asked for it, it was there, ready, in 10 minutes. Why? Because all of the ingredients were coming from the back of the house. So at the back of the house, there was a chicken coop with 50 chickens, and there was a big bahçe with all sorts of different vegetables and fruits. And all of this was managed by my grandfather, of course. He was the master of this bahçe and this chicken coop. But he would take me on a tour, and he would show me how the chicken lay eggs, and he would show me when is the right time to water the tomato plants, and he would tell me when is the right time for each fruit to be picked. Yeah? And right in the middle of all this, he would start teasing me with questions. So, where's your girlfriend? I was 10 years old. Where's your girlfriend? Where's your wife? Am I going to see grandchildren? I need to see great-grandchildren from you. You are the only Sarakatsanos. Sarakatsanos is my surname. You're the only Sarakatsanos left. Don't forget this. I need to see from age 10 the same story every year. Where's your grandchildren? So, this piece of heaven was a 9-hour drive from Athens. 9-hour drive, yet we drove. Every year we took the car and we went to the good car. We had a good car and a shitty car. The shitty car is the one that breaks down every couple of blocks, so it's only for Athens. The good car is the one that drove us all the way up to the north, and plus it has a cassette player. Yes, for anyone born before the 90s, you know why a cassette player in a car is a major advantage. Because before that we had the radio, and sometimes you drive between the mountains and you lose the signal. But my parents didn't know when the signal would come back, so they just leave it on. But then you're driving in the mountains, everyone gets dizzy, and everyone stops talking in the car, and we're all holding our bellies, and we just listen to static, like shh, for hours, until we got out of the mountains. We used to go there around the end of October, when is the time to pick up the cotton from the fields. When they send the machines and the workers into the cotton fields, and they rip the plants from the earth, and they filter out all the cotton, and they put it on big trucks and they move it to the factories, right? So especially if you're driving between those fields, especially on a windy day, all the cotton fluff escapes the machines, and it looks like it's snowing everywhere. And my father would do the same joke every summer, every October, the same thing. He would drive behind the truck with all the fluff escaping the truck and hitting the windshield, which looked like snow, and he would wake me up from the back seat. He said, "Look, it's snowing!" And every year I would fall for the same joke. I told you about the cassette player. There is, of course, it's an advantage of the cassette player, but my parents never thought of taking a second cassette with them on the trip. One, and it's 75 minutes long, the cassette, and it's like 9 hours. So if you you divide it, it's 7.2 times on your way up, and 7.2, 14 times the same tape. By the end of the trip, I knew all the lyrics by heart. I knew all the back vocals, the music arrangements, everything. I knew the whole, and we had this tape of Haris Alexiou. Do you know Haris Alexiou?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So we had, it's like very sort of dancing music, but with very sort of heartfelt and like strong and dramatic lyrics. So the story is very dramatic, but the music is not. To give you an example, because I see the confusion in your eyes. So, this song goes. I wish that God was a drunk. It says, I wish that God was drinking. Because then, on a high moment when he's drunk, he would forgive humanity, and he would take a knife and he would stab the angel of death to death. So he would kill the angel of death, and then humanity's problems would be over. I don't know how exactly that would be, but this is the story. So. Να σου να δε μου πότεις, να σωθεί άνθρωπο της, στο μεθύσι σου απάνω, να μαχαιρώνες το χαρό. So that exact high note is the one that really caught my attention. So I'm 4 years old, and I'm like, at the backseat of the car, I'm like, I've never sang in my life. I've never sang in my life. And then at the top note, I open my 4 years old, the backseat, I'm like, and my mother looks at me and says, my boy will become a singer. So one of the funniest things about this trip was my father's accent. My father had a very strong accent from the village and a dialect, but then he moved to Athens when he was young. And all of his Athenian friends were making fun of his accent from the village. So he switched. Over the years, he learned how to speak like an Athenian. But then he would go to the village, and all of his friends from the village would make fun of his Athenian accent. So he was forever trapped between those two accents. And the funny thing is that on the way, every few kilometers, it would shift. It's like, it would start like skipping letters and moving words in the sentence around. By the time we got to the village, nothing made sense anymore. And me and my mother, of course, made fun of it like it was our favorite thing. It was like, every time. But after spending 2 weeks in the village, my accent would change. Because I wanted to adapt. I wanted to feel like welcome from the kids. So I would start talking like them, and then I would go back to Athens, and I would use words like kardash or like tsieri or like I don't know, fit me. Kardash. Yes. Or like what else?
Kalp, yürek.
No.
Canım.
Canım, exactly. And then my Athenian friends would be like, what are you talking about? What is this strange language? And so it was confusion, yeah? It was very confusing. And this confusion didn't stop at grammar and syntax. It leaked into other fields of my life. For example, history. 5th grade, first day of history lesson. The teacher starts with an easy and sort of like nice, charming story, easy to memorize. So he starts with the newly founded Greek state, 1821. And he talks to us about this guy called Giovanni Capodistra. Giovanni Capodistra was a very sort of aspiring young man from the islands between Italy and Greece. And he was from a rich family. He was the first to graduate medicine. I think the only one to graduate medicine from his island. And then he was sent to Europe to be cultivated and educated and prepared. And he was sent back to Greece to govern. So he became the first governor of Greece. And as the first governor, he built the first roads and the first universities and the first libraries and the first everything. And everything got his name. Okay, Giovanni Capodistra. Everywhere you go around Greece, Giovanni Capodistra. One of the first things that he did for Athenians is that he taught Athenians how to eat potatoes. So apparently before Giovanni, we didn't eat potatoes in Athens. Now what he did is that he unloaded this huge load of potatoes at the dock, the port, and he just left it there. And for days no one touched it. Because Athenians, they didn't trust this prince from Europe with his gifts and who is he, you know? What is this thing that he left at the dock? So they didn't touch it. And Giovanni got a bit concerned that the potatoes will go bad, will rot. So what he did is that he put them in a room and he put guards to guard it outside, and he instructed the guards to leave the doors unlocked. And when night falls, to turn a blind eye. Pretend no one's there. What do you think happened the next morning? All the potatoes were gone, exactly. Poof. And this, children, teaches us about Athenians and their suspicious nature, because after years of oppression, they've learned to distrust their foreign rulers. I'm like, this is an amazing story. And then I went back home and I got into the house and I go, Dad, I learned this amazing Giovanni about this time. And the potatoes, and no one touched them. You put them in a room and this happened. And then this is why we're suspicious. He says, what kind of bullshit story is this? Is this what they teach you at school? He said, 1821, the country was, half of the people were dying at war and the other half were starving, were feeding from the dead. You think they would leave a pile of potatoes untouched? Besides, what Athens are you talking about? Athens back then was a village inhabited practically by Albanians. There was no Athens. It was people from the villages who came and made Athens much later. It was not, this is bullshit. And then my mother comes into the living room and starts like dragging my father from like, don't say these things to the child. This is the kind of homeschooling that I got. Now, what took me years to realize is that this trip to the north, this annual trip to the north, was more than vacation. It was a chance for the family to reconnect, of course, but it was a chance for my father and for the 3 generations of Sarakatsanis to sort of meet. And it was my father's agony to create the bond between me and my grandfather, between the 2 disconnected generations. And the last time we went as a family to my grandfather was in 1997. Then my mother stopped following, it was not interesting anymore. Then a few years later I left Greece, I went to study. A few years later my father passed. So yeah, family traditions come to an end. So 3 years ago, I was invited to Athens by a film production company, and they invited me to join them on a filming trip. And I went to their office, and they showed me the route of this filming trip, and it was a route that was connecting the eastern borders of Greece with Turkey, all the way through northern Greece to the western borders with Albania. This line that connects east to the west. And we would visit, also it passes straight through my grandfather's village, by the way. I didn't say that to them, but I saw the route on the map. It passed straight through my grandfather's village. So immediately I said yes to the project. And the project was interesting. The project was, we would visit different cultural groups that all of them live in this area, and each of them speaks a different language. Different to Greek, I mean. Now, how did these cultural groups find themselves in this area, you might be asking yourselves, or not? No? But I will tell you anyway, don't worry. Migration waves, religious wars, population exchanges. In one way or another, these groups were sort of trapped between Greek borders. And for the past 200 years, these minorities have been treated as such, as minorities. So some of them had to give up their language, some of them had to give up their religion, some of them had to give up their right to mobility. They were barred in the villages. So for me as a Greek, starting this filming trip, visiting all those groups and seeing how Greek governments treated them, it was more of a guilt trip than a filming trip, if you catch my drift. Give you an example. First thing I remember is walking into this cafe when we reached our first destination. And as soon as I walk in, I realize that everyone around me speaks a different language. But as soon as they see me walk in, they all switch to Greek. So I get my coffee, I go outside, I talk to my colleagues, I say, hey, this and this happened. They say, yeah, it's normal, you know, these groups have been banned from using their language for over 100 years now. They would sing songs in their language, they would party at home and sing songs of their culture in their home. and the police or the army, depending on the time, it would break into their house and they would break their instruments and they would put them to prison for singing in their language. And I said, yeah, but that's like 100 years ago now. It's not. And they said, well, now it's not the army and the police, but now it's the fascists. Now it's the Nazi party supporters. Now it's the, you know, they saw a guy with a shaved head walking in the cafe. They sort of, maybe I should switch. The next thing I remember it was when we visited this lady from Cappadocia. Cappadocia, Anatolia, yeah, Cappadocia, nice. It's nice when you don't have to explain these things. Very nice, thank you. So we met this lady from Cappadocia, and she moved to Greece with a population exchange. Yeah, when 1.5 million people went one way and 500,000 people went the other way, and many villages were torn apart and many communities were separated. And we met this lady, and she sang us songs in Turkish. And at the end of the thing, we were like, "Wow, Granny, that's nice that you remember your Turkish. Like you were 7 years old when you moved, and you still remember all your Turkish." And she says, "I didn't speak Turkish in Cappadocia. I only spoke Greek with my friends and my relatives. But what happened is that when they moved us to a village where only Turkish-speaking people were living. So I had to learn Turkish to survive." The next thing I remember is being in Thessaloniki, and we interviewed the Jewish community, the Sephardic Jews of Thessaloniki. Thessaloniki, before the Second World War, was 60% Jewish population. After the war, it was just 1% left. So we interviewed this lady, and we interviewed her, and we asked her to sing us a song in Hebrew or in Ladino, because that's the thing. The reason why we were there was to record the songs in their language, in their languages, right? It was an effort to sort of preserve, to save the songs that were disappearing. So we asked her to sing a song after the interview, and she says, "I don't remember any." Now, it was like 3 cameras, a microphone, so like a whole crew of people. Maybe you remember a song, Granny? Maybe one little song? Like, no, I don't remember any. It's like, we have to, come on, it's like so many, it's a big production. Come on, maybe a lullaby that your grandmother used to sing to you when you were, like, we're pushing, we're trying to get the song out. And she says, honey, she says, after the war, there was no grandmother here to sing us lullabies. So what I'm trying to say is that either through forced adaptation or oppression or genocide, these songs that we were trying to save and record and preserve, they were disappearing as the communities were falling apart. Over the years, fewer and fewer people had the courage to sing these songs. They were afraid. So they didn't sing the lyrics, and instead they played the melodies only. But what happens is that over decades that you only play the melodies of a song, the lyrics are forgotten. So from songs, these became tunes. One of them is this. I don't know if anyone recognizes this melody. It's familiar. One person at the back. Where is this from?
It sounds similar to a lullaby.
Uh-huh.
My grandmother used to sing. Sounds similar.
You?
Me,
Yeah?
Sarıgil'in from Azerbaijan.
From Azerbaijan. So yours were Turkish?
This is Turkish too.
Azari.
This one is Turkish too.
Anyone else recognizes the melody? Yeah? Familiar? I mean, you can say this song exists in 5-10 different languages. You can say, like, don't be so dramatic, don't be so Greek about it. It's fine. It's a song, it lost its lyrics in one language, it found its lyrics in another language. Like, don't be so dramatic. But I have a reason to be so dramatic, apart from being Greek. And this is that there is a special connection between the word we use for song in Greek and what a song is actually. So the word we use for song is tragoudi. Tragoudi. Tragoudi sounds familiar maybe to some of you because it stems from the word tragedy. And tragedy literally means
Goat song.
singing to a goat. Now, why would someone sing to a goat, you might be asking yourselves, or not? But I will tell you anyway. So the whole thing was a ritual. Right? Everyone gathered in the middle of the square of the town or of the village, and they built a fire, and they brought food and drinks. Yeah, platters with meat and wine, and they danced and they laughed and they sang songs and they shared their stories. And at the peak of the night, everyone had a chance to get something off of their chest. So whatever unforgivable guilt you're carrying, whatever, is it you mistreated your husband? Is it you? Did you hit your child? Were you unfair to a customer? Whatever you did that you couldn't forgive yourself, you could take this and you could put it on a goat. And then you would slaughter the goat. And then you would roast the meat and offer it to the gods. Now, would the gods eat the goat meat? Of course not. But they would be pleased with the fumes and the smells. They would just let you continue with your life. And then you would take the meat and eat it and continue to party. Yes. So, in a sense, whatever sacrifice you didn't make in your life, you sacrifice the goat instead. Hence the idea of the scapegoat. Now, since then, there's 3,000 years distance, yes? And now, in modern Greece, we don't slaughter goats at parties anymore. This is an ancient practice. We don't do this anymore. But there is a connection between tragedy and tragoudi. And there's been many theories, many linguists and many historians that try to find a connection between the two. And there's one theory that I really like, which says, what is a song? If you look at it, if you look at the lyrics of a song, what is a song? Isn't the song the I love you, I didn't tell you when it was time? The hug I didn't give you when you were leaving and I didn't come to say bye? Isn't the song the sacrifice I didn't make in my life? And by singing it, doesn't it feel a bit like I made it? So after a long day of filming with the Jewish community in Thessaloniki, we went off the highway road and into the mountains. And we were driving for hours and hours and hours and hours and past many deserted, empty, dark villages. And at some point we found ourselves, around 11, 12 at night, we found ourselves in this tiny little village, at the end of which there was a stone-built hotel with two big gates, and they opened the gates and the two vans of the production quickly drove in, and they closed the gates very quickly, and we unloaded the vans from the equipment, and the crew got off, and we all went down the staircase, and there we were greeted by this group of men that were sitting around a table, a big, big table, like a sort of wedding table, you know. And some of them were holding instruments in their hands. And even though they had to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go and pick the beans from the field, because that's what they do, and even though no one wants attention on these groups, and they were hiding it from the rest of the village, because they don't want to know that we were there filming them, and even it's late at night, and they were waiting for us. They were there, and they welcomed us, and they played music for us, and they shared their stories with us, and the platters with meat started to come, and the jugs filled with wine, and then one thing brought the next, and at some point, you couldn't tell who is who. You couldn't tell who is the villagers and who is the filming crew. Everyone was one big group. The camera guy left the camera and started dancing around in circles. The guy who held the boom, the microphone, he left the boom and he was eating fries off the side of the table. Yeah? And around 4 o'clock in the morning, when everyone's stomach and everyone's mind is full, quiet. And at the other side of the table, I hear someone start mumbling some words. And I'm not sure exactly what it is, if he's singing or if he's speaking, what is he saying, but the person next to him starts mumbling the same exact words. And then the person next to him and next and next, and one by one around the table, like flames on a birthday cake. They start lighting up around the table and they're all singing the same exact thing. And there's two things I realize at this moment. One, that this is one of the songs we thought it was long forgotten in the decades, that it has lost its lyrics and no one sang it anymore. And they all know it. And they're 20, 25 years old, and they all know the lyrics by heart. And the second thing I realized is that exactly like this, by staying in basements and singing with each other, by sharing these songs over the generation after generation after generation, by hiding from everyone else, by waiting for us, even though we're late, by saying no to anyone, to the fascists, to the police, to the army, to anyone who tells them otherwise, by resisting and by sticking together and singing the songs, this is how songs survive. Fantastic, thank you. This is Ezra, everyone. A round of applause for Ezra and her amazing technical skills. Okay, how are you holding up?
Amazing.
Really?
Yes.
I expected to hear depressed. You're so depressed, huh? It's such a difficult thing to put a show together with music, with like music from the Balkans and from. It's all sad songs. We have no happy songs in Greece. It's a tragedy. It's like only. Have you noticed this?
We don't have.
You don't have happy songs either? You do have happy songs, actually. There is one song that my grandfather taught me when I was going to the village. Let me see, okay. I don't know them, but you can help me, okay? Okay. Nice song, yeah? Oh, thank you so much. And it's in Turkish. It's the only song my grandfather taught me. Further proof that we have no happy songs in Greece. We use the Turkish ones to have a good time. No, there is actually, on this trip, I met a guy who, his job is to be a sound restorator. So you know what that is? So he takes old records, and he restores the sound so that it sounds clear again. So he gave me an explanation. He said, back in the day, like when record players came in fashion, it was a very expensive, it was a luxury thing. It was a luxury thing to have a record player. Why? Because every time you played the record, yeah, exactly, faded, and then you played it 2-3 times, and then you just threw it away. And also the needles were very expensive, the needles of the record player. You played like 5-6 records, poof, you had to, so it was a very expensive thing that you kept in a glass box, locked, and then when guests would come to the house, you would unlock it and play. And what you would play when guests would come to your house, you would play happy music, entertaining music, dancing music, of course, yes? Now what happens 100 years later when a musicologist opens a box of old records? What does he find? The ones that are left are only the sad songs that no one played. So we have this idea that in the 1920s people were like sipping whiskey next to the window and looking like listening to sad. No, they were partying, they were having fun, and now we're left for all the sad songs. So I told you how this route from east to the west, how this line connecting this filming trip, how it passed through my grandfather's village, right? You remember that, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I still hadn't told anyone in the filming crew, in my like collaborate. I didn't want to be the emotional guy. Like, can we go by my grandfather's village? I didn't want to be that guy. So I just kept it a secret. But then the night, that night we parked 20 minutes away from my grandfather's village, and the next day at 12:30 we would leave and would go 2 hours away from my grandfather. So it was my last chance. It was like, So I woke up in the morning very early. I took the keys of one of the two vans. I took the van and I left. I sent a message to the producer saying, "Hi, good morning. I took one of the two vans. See you at 12:30 on the highway." We gave a spot, an appointment. That was it. So I took the highway and I started driving to my grandfather's village, and many things have changed. The highways have been rebuilt, and everything looked different. But as soon as I was in the village, everything looked exactly as if I was there like a week ago. Exactly the same, exactly the same. I drove up the street to my grandfather's house, and I knocked on the door, and my grandmother opens the door, and she's surprised for like 2 seconds, and then she goes into grandma mode. So she starts like cooking immediately. Eat. So my grandfather comes after her, and that's you? Did you recognize me? Yeah, I guess. So my grandfather comes after, and he looks at me, and even though he calls me my grandson, Agonimu, he says, but I can see in his eyes that he doesn't recognize me. Like he's not fully sure of who I am. But he's 99 years old now. Yeah, so some memory gaps are expected. Yeah. So I give him some time. He starts making me coffee, then he takes me on a tour to the bahçe. And now the chicken are 200. There used to be 50, now he has 200 chicken. Now the bahçe is double the size. And now he's experimenting, like he's taking an apple tree and a pear tree, and he's like breeding them to make new trees, and he's going in new places. 99 years old, and right in the middle of all this, he turns to me and he says, no, he says, whose son are you? Which grandchild? And I say, it's Anastasis, it's Dimitrios' son. And then I see that his eyes get a bit watery. And then he gives me a hug. And then he says, so where's your girlfriend? You have a wife yet? Am I going to see great-grandchildren? You are the last Sarakatsanos. You need to bring me back. It's important. I say, Granddad, I'm sorry. It's not so easy. It's not as easy as you think for me to like have children. And he says, why do you think it was easy for me? He says, I was locked up in a concentration camp in Germany making bullets for 2 years when I saw your grandmother for the first time. And I'm like, oh my God, not the concentration camp story again. Because I know how long it takes, and it's always this long story. I was there for 2 years, and they kept us separate, so we had to flirt through a fence. You think that stopped us? No. We kept flirting, we kept exchanging secret messages and meeting at night, and then in 2 years that we spent in this hell, there was even a group wedding arranged, and we got married. And we came back. I brought her back to Greece. She was from Ukraine. I brought her back to Greece with me. And do you think our troubles ended there? No. Because now in the village where I grew up in, no one wanted a communist and his Ukrainian bride in fear of another German attack, so we had to leave. So we didn't stop there. We packed our stuff, and I took my newly wed bride, and I took my newly born son, your father, Dimitris, and we walked as far away from this place as our feet could take us. And this is where we ended up, and we started all over again. 12:30, I need to be on the highway. Thank you very much, grandfather. He was giving me like pomegranates, and he was giving me, so I was lifting my shirt and was like putting all the fruits, and so I left, thank you very much. I left, I got in the van, I met the rest of the team, and then we went to our next stop, which was the village of the Pomaks. Do you know the Pomaks?
Yeah.
Pomak. And there we met this Emine, this beautiful, beautiful young lady. She's a singer, and she sang us a song about Ayşe and Yorgos. Ayşe and Yorgos, yeah? And the story says, do you want me to tell you the story?
Yes.
I can also play you the recording. I recorded her when she was singing. So the story goes like this: Ayşe and Yorgos. Yorgos says, my love, Ayşe, did you ask your mother, is she gonna let us get married? And then Ayşe says, I asked her, but I don't think you're gonna like what she said. Yorgos says, what did she say? She said, even if she had 3 daughters, she wouldn't give you 1. Shall we play the recording? Why, says Yorgos? Why? Would your mother say something like this? And then Aisha says, well, you know why, because you're Greek. Greeks, you know what they do. They drink ouzo and they gamble. But as we saw in my grandfather's story, love knows no limits, right? So this singer that you just heard, she told us that this song was written 30 years ago for Aisha and Yorgos. And Aisha and Yorgos actually got married. And now they live in Athens. And they have 3 children. And they have a taverna. And you know what they do at the taverna, yeah? They drink ouzo and they gamble. Yes. Thank you. So the last stop of the filming trip, we invited a group of researchers and scientists, but all of them had studied the region, this region in northern Greece, and they knew which group comes from where and their history and their culture. And you good? Yeah. And at the end of the day, we had this dinner party that we invited all of them to sit around the table and sort of celebrate the end of the filming. And they sat me across this guy who is a genealogist. So he's studying the family trees of all these the family trees of all these groups, and which surname comes from where, and he makes all the connections. And naturally, the conversation will revolve around surnames. So at some point, he asked me, "What is your surname?" And I said Sarakatsanos. And he was surprised. He was like, "Oh, this is interesting. It's a tribal name. It's from shepherds." So he said, "Where's your grandfather from?" I said, "Well, he used to live in this village, but then he left, and then he came back, and then and he had to move, and now he lives in this village." So no. Where's the village that he grew up in? I said, "The village that he grew up in is Klisura. Klisura, it's called." He said, "I'm sorry to be the one to break it to you, but I don't think that's true."
Huh?
He said this village was built and inhabited strictly by Romanian Vlachs, the Ottoman people. There was never a Greek person in this village. There was never a Sarakatsanos in this village. So he started giving me all the references and the research and the data. And half an hour later, my reality was completely shattered. So he concluded, your grandfather is either not from that place, from another village, or he's lying about his surname. Right. Silence. Don't freak out, it's good. Identity, you've studied this, you know this, it's constructed. Identity is largely constructed. What is a name? A name is just a name, isn't it? Why am I upset? why am I feeling this? Why am I feeling like I need to, and there's not much that I can do, because then the next day we're going back to Athens. I mean, I could go back to the village and ask my grandfather, hey, what's up with this, what he told me. But I don't think like my 99-year-old grandfather would be like, oh yeah, this? Oh yeah, it was a lie. Yeah, all your life, yeah. So I go back to Athens and I start asking my aunts and my uncles and all the relatives, and I start looking through photo albums, and I can't connect the dots. I can't find the connection. So I ask around and ask around and ask around, and nothing comes up, and then I remember my father's tapes. The tape recorder that he used to visit all the relatives. So I go back and I look through his stuff. All of his stuff is now in a storage room. So I open the boxes and I start looking through the stuff. And looking, and at some point I find a box and it's filled with tapes. And all of them are very carefully labeled, who says what, when. He even digitized the tapes, he made them into digital recordings on the computer. He printed some of the things out, he wrote them down. And then I take out tapes, and at the bottom of it there is a letter. And the letter says, today, the 10th of October 2002, I start writing. I have collected enough information to start telling this story. The reason why I'm doing this is because I want to give an answer to the question that has been troubling me since I was a small child, and this question is, how did we end up here? This is only for my son to read. If this accidentally fell into your hands, stop reading now. If anything happens to me and I am unable to finish this, let it be my son Anastasis who picks it up and continues with the story. So I listened through all of the tapes, and I read all the interviews, and the story is this. Klisura, this village, did not exist before 1890. The hill on top of which Klisura was built, part of the mountain, this mountain was not even part of Greece. Greece was somewhere a bit further than Athens, it was down the south. That part is what we called Macedonia. And Macedonia was a part of land, a piece of land that many different countries wanted a piece of it. Serbia, Bulgaria, yes, Romania. And what Romania did is that they sent teachers from Bucharest to the south region to build schools to spread the language. One of the teachers that they sent from Bucharest was the teacher that built this school around which Klisura was built, was founded. And on his way to this village, on his way to this hill, he was telling people in the mountains and the valleys, he was meeting shepherds on his way, and he was telling them, there is a place down south that you can build your house and you can settle, you can stay. There's a school to send your children, and Romania is supporting this. Even Turkey is supporting this. 1 golden lira a month for every family that sends their kids to a Romanian school. Come, it's a good deal. Come. Now, my ancestors' family, up until then, they were just spending the winters in the mountains and the summers in the valley. And when they would run out of food and grass, they would move to the next mountain and to the next valley and to the next mountain and to the next valley. They didn't know what is settle for good. What is build a house with an actual floor? Why? But it was okay, it went well. For a few years it went well, and then things changed, because then Greece expanded to all sides. And also now including this village, Klisura. And of course the war between the Greeks and the Ottomans started, which means that the Ottoman people had to pack and go, or stay, and face the consequences. And it was then that the registry of the village was burned, accidentally set on fire one night. And all the names were burned. And then my great-grandfather took his children one by one to the registry, and he registered them again, and he gave them each child a different Greek-sounding name. And every child that was born after also was taken to the registry and was assigned a different Greek-sounding name. Thus my grandfather was born under the name Sarakatsanos, and he was taught to stand by and stand next to and defend his Greek-sounding surname. Huh? I mean, in the house they would speak the dialect, Aroman dialect, Yeah? But outside the house, for anyone else, if anyone else was asking, he was a full-blood, 100% Greek Sarakatsanos. Of course, his blue eyes and his blonde hair was a giveaway. And of course, at school, occasionally he would slip the wrong word in Aroman, and then his classmates would make fun of him, or the teacher would beat him. So, for my grandfather to be Greek, it was not a matter of preference. It was not a preference, it was a necessity. It was so necessary that when time came and he was asked to fight in the Second World War, the fight against the Germans, to protect his country, he took the gun and he threw himself in the battlefield. And you know what happened next. When my father was my age, 36, and all of his brothers and sisters had moved to Athens, they also took him and they moved him to Athens with them, so that he will spend his last day. How little did they know? His last days, he's 99 now, so he would spend his last days in Athens with his children. And they arranged for him a flat that he can stay in, and they bought a little shop that he can be busy with during the day. And after a couple of years, he packed his stuff and he went back to the village. Just one day, he packed his suitcases and left. And that happened when I was around 10 years old, and in my 10-year-old mind, this didn't make any sense. Why would someone who has everything, like a house from his kids and a place to work and be busy, and all of his children and grandchildren around him, why would someone give up all of this to do what? To go to the village and wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and milk goats? Why? But looking back now, and looking at the wars and the displacements, and the pain, and the fear that painted the landscape of this man's life, if I see how many times this man has been robbed of his religion and his ethnicity and his family and his birthplace and his language, if you take out all of these things, I don't see much left outside of his bacha. So now I'll go. And I'll make my own bacha. And I will collect stories and songs. And some of them will be Macedonian, some Bulgarian, some Cappadocian, some Albanian, some English, some Dutch, some Cypriots, some... and I will make my own bacha. And if you visit me, I can take you on a tour. Thank you for listening.